Senator Barrasso, good morning.
Hey, how are you? Thanks so much for having me this morning.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's perfect timing, and we just actually had it in our news at the top of the hour. You had one of our Campbell County commissioners out in Washington, didn't you?
Well, we sure did, and he did a terrific job testifying yesterday. Actually, your chairman of the Campbell County Board of Commissioners, Mark Christensen, was here, testified at the Senate Energy Committee about the importance of Wyoming in terms of energy, Campbell County in terms of our nation's energy, but also just in terms of the importance of our nation's role in providing enough energy so that we're not so dependent on foreign countries, and how we should make it easier in America to explore for American energy, to use American energy. And, Campbell County, to me, is ground zero of energy production in America, whether it's coal, oil, gas, you name it, Campbell County is the place.
And you have a bill proposed in the Senate right now to kind of help streamline that process, don't you?
Well, it's Senate Bill 2440 that Mark testified about, and it's called the BLM Permit Processing Improvement Act. And the idea is it's taken a heck of a long time to get permits approved to explore for energy on federal land. It's a lot easier to do it on state land or on private land. And Wyoming, with half of our state being under the control of Washington, what we find is if companies are going to explore for energy, they're saying, why go through all the hassles, the headaches, and the expense of working with Washington and trying to get permits when we find somebody on private land someplace else? It's just a lot easier, cheaper, and more efficient to go and look for that energy there. Well, it's important for not just for Campbell County, but for the state of Wyoming, that energy is produced in Wyoming. The state gets some revenue from that, which is used to pay for things like the Hathaway scholarships. So, energy's role in Wyoming has been such an important part of our economy that, we all know what an important role it plays, to the point that just the other day there was an article that mentioned Wyoming, I think, is ranked second in the country in terms of being a pro-business state, because we know how important it is for our economy, for the people, the quality of life, the income levels, all of those things, for which we do very, very well in Wyoming, and so much of it's related to energy.
Well, and one of the things that you mentioned with all the federal land here in Wyoming. Now, I mean, obviously, coal is the big thing here in Campbell County, but natural gas and oil are also big in Wyoming. Do you think that we're losing some of that to North Dakota, who obviously has a lot less federally owned land?
I think we are. And as Mark said yesterday, he said, many of you know that we produce, he was talking about Campbell County, we produce approximately 40% of the nation's coal. What you may not know is that Campbell County is also the top producer of crude oil in Wyoming. And you're right, it's a lot easier, simpler, and less expensive in North Dakota to go after that energy, because it's on either state land or private land, and you don't have to deal with Washington and the federal regulators coming in and putting on new regulations that are burdensome, they're expensive, they're time-consuming, and American people need the energy, the world needs the enemy, and needs the energy, and we have so many opportunities, so we're not sending money to people who may be our enemies in the future, or maybe even today are our enemies, as we talk about how to pick up and bring importing energy to the United States. We ought to be exporting our American energy, for which we have such an abundance.
Well, and of course, the BLM is just one of the hurdles in the way. I mean, obviously the EPA is even an even bigger hurdle, and we'll get to that in a second. But in particular, I mean, what would this bill, Senate 2440, exactly what does it do to help streamline that process?
Well, it gives some level of certainty that the BLM offices will be fully staffed to have people actually work through the applications in a timely manner, because what happens now is if someone applies for a permit to drill, to explore for energy, they end up paying a fee, and we want to make sure that fee goes to the state offices to hire people in the location where they want to go look for the energy. When Washington puts a fee on some of these things, if it just goes into kind of the the sinkhole of the federal treasury, you don't really get any bang for the buck. And the folks that want to do the exploration, they're saying, we don't mind paying for a permission form and the application, but we want an answer. And we want an answer in a timely way. And if we put this money in, we want that money to go to make sure there are enough people on the ground right there at field offices, specifically in Wyoming, to get the work done. And it's not just Wyoming that's impacted. This is a bipartisan bill, which a lot of that doesn't happen here in Washington. But this bill that I've introduced, I've co-sponsored it with a Democrat from New Mexico, Tom Udall. We have 6 Democrats and 6 Republicans who have co-sponsored it. So it's coming forth in a way that we say, look, we need to get this done. This is important for energy security in our country.
Now, and you mentioned right now these fees, I guess they're going into the general fund for the BLM. Does it turn out that the offices in Nevada and California are getting more of that share than maybe they should?
Now, I wouldn't say that. I think just in the past, some of this is just going into the federal treasury, so that the money isn't really applied to where it ought to go. It's when you put the money in, you want to make sure it goes to the BLM offices to make sure that they're staffed. And so much of the stuff that some of the environmental extremists are doing are filing lawsuits that are making it taking up the time of the BLM field officers who have to go comply with issues related to the lawsuit, so they're not available to do the research and the study to see if it's okay to go and explore for energy. So it does seem that the more you get government involved, the more complicated and time-consuming and expensive it becomes. And this says, hey, we want to make sure that we have some certainty that the offices are fully staffed to focus on doing the research work on our opportunities to go and get more American energy.
Oh, so that money is not even staying in the BLM. It's just going into the Treasury, which obviously is just being squandered left and right on all kinds of crazy stuff.
Well, that's how it initially was set up, and then we've tried to focus it into the BLM, and then we want to make sure it's targeted to the states and the areas where the applications are made.
Oh, okay. Well, and do you think that the Senate Majority Leader is going to let you have a vote on this?
Well, that's what we're pushing for, and that's why we have a bipartisan. When you have an equal number of Republican and Democrat co-sponsors, you would think that Harry Reid would say, okay, we'll bring it up, but he has been such an obstructionist on just about everything. I think the president doesn't want bills put on his desk. We haven't been able to put amendments onto bills because Harry Reid has been blocking them left and right. And it's interesting, he's not just blocking Republicans, he's blocking Democrat votes as well. There have been about 2,000 amendments to bills on the floor of the Senate that have been filed over the last 12 months. And of those, I think 20 of them have had votes, and less than 10 of those are Democrat votes. So there's a lot of members who feel that they have been left out of the process on both sides of the table, on the aisle. But it does seem that it's all driven by President Obama telling Harry Reid, "Hey, I don't want to have to deal with any of this stuff." So they like using executive action, which is what your earlier point was about the EPA. What they're doing goes way beyond, I think, the original intent of legislation, whether it's the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, the Endangered Species Act. I think they're going to extremes that they don't have the right to do, but they force them through, and then we end up having to sue to just try to get back to where we think the law ought to be applied in a way that when you read the law, it says, hey, this is where we ought to be. So when you take a look at the regulations that the EPA's come out now recently with coal and coal-fired power plants and using coal, which obviously is the most available, affordable, reliable, and secure source of energy that we have in this country, the regulations, I believe, are ones that are really not consistent with the law as written. They have a kind of a cap and trade or a cap and tax approach. And when the president, even when he had 60 Democrats in the Senate and he had the Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House, he couldn't get it passed. Could not get it passed in Congress. So then he's just saying, well, couldn't get it passed, I'll do it myself. I have a pen, I have a phone, and I think that he has gone way beyond really his authority. But you end up, what you see is he does things, and then you end up having to take him to court. And We have had a number of favorable rulings in the court, but it takes time to get there, and that's the disadvantage that we're looking at right now. He's made a number of illegal appointments, and that's not me saying that. It's the Supreme Court that said it with his use of recess, with the president's use of recess appointments. Of course, he did them over 2 years ago, and finally, in the last 2 months, we've gotten the ruling.
Well, and you mentioned the lawsuits. I mean, obviously, on the House side, the House is pursuing a course of action to file some lawsuits to try to do something about these Obamacare mandates that have just been fiddled around with constantly. I think what was it, like 47 times they've changed the law that Congress passed legally.
This is where we talk about the president and really failing to uphold the law of the land. He seems to think that the law is whatever he says it is on any given day. And there was a court ruling last week in the D.C. Court of Appeals specifically related to the health care law and who can get subsidies and who can't. I spent 5 years in the Wyoming State Senate, and John Hines, state senator from Campbell County there, I sat next to him in the state Senate. He was a wonderful mentor to work with. Mike Enzi, the other U.S. senator who spent time in the Wyoming House and Senate. We know what it's like to read a bill, to vote on a bill, and realize what the words say. And I think the health care law was passed by a lot of people who never read it in the first place, who didn't know what was in it. They took Nancy Pelosi at her word when she said, well, first you have to pass it before you get to find out what's in it. And then people took, the Democrats who voted for it, took the president at his word when he said it would lower insurance premiums by $2,500 a year, and if you like what you have, you can keep it. Now they, what the fact checkers call that the lie of the year. So we know from our time in the Wyoming legislature what laws mean, and we also know that Washington so often attaches to legislation money for states that's tied with strings attached. So there's strings attached. That if the state takes the money, there are things that the states need to do. And that's the way the health care law was written with the subsidies, that states that didn't set up an exchange, the subsidies wouldn't come to those states. But now President Obama said, oh, no, we never meant it that way. Well, that's the way the law is written, and that's one of the number of different ways that he's continued to change the law. And I think the reason he's doing these things is because he knows the law is very unpopular, but it would be more unpopular if you actually applied it as it's written. And with it upcoming elections, coming up in November, where the president's afraid they're going to lose the Senate, and where the Republicans have 45 senators, we need to pick up 6 to get to the majority and take the gavel away from Harry Reid so we can, get back to really putting forth an agenda that will get people back to work. It focuses on jobs and the economy, as well as the government spending and our debt. The focus is trying to pick up those Senate seats, and 3 of them are in states right adjacent to Wyoming. We have where they're current Democrats, and we're trying to take those seats to the Republicans, and it's Montana and South Dakota and Colorado. Each one of those has an opportunity this year for those of us who are trying to retire Harry Reid and get him out of the way so we can really get focused on jobs in the economy and debt and spending, which is an area that the president doesn't seem to want to be focused on.
Well, and since you mentioned Harry Reid again, obviously the elections in November are going to be pretty important. But and this is something that I just learned about a few days ago, and maybe you could just kind of explain how this works. But the Senate has a rule on the number of amendments that can be considered at any given time. And you can correct me if I'm wrong about any of this, but and from what I hear, Harry Reid has been proposing just ridiculous amendments and amendments that actually do nothing to tie up this limit, so that meaningful amendments to laws can't be proposed. I mean, is that's what's going on?
Well, yeah, it's it's amazing. You kind of go to civics class in school and you learn and study, and even spending time in the Wyoming State Senate didn't prepare me for the sort of things that I've been finding here, the rules and the regulations, the way the U.S. Senate works. And you're right, it's called filling the amendment tree, so that the majority leader of the Senate gets the first right to talk on the floor. So he can propose an amendment, and then you can do some sub-amendments under that. But there's only a certain number before the, quote, all the branches of the tree are filled, so there can be no more amendments offered. So that's what happens now. We can introduce amendments, but you can't bring them up for a vote because he always has one of his amendments in line ahead of you. And he's done that to both the Democrats and the Republicans because he wants to protect some of his members from having to take votes. And I would say if you're afraid to vote, you shouldn't run for office. If you're afraid to let people know where you stand on things, then don't stand for elected office. And you can never get away with this in the Wyoming state legislature, where every amendment gets a vote, every vote is recorded, and people know where you stand on things. But that's not happening in Washington these days, and we see with his activities, we see his members have filed about 1,000 amendments to bills, and then they send out press releases and say, well, I'm doing this and I'm fighting the good fight, but in fact, they know that there's not going to ever be a vote on the amendments that they're introducing, which gives them an opportunity to go home and pretend one way, but be in a different mindset.
And of course, you turn around and you turn on CNN or one of the three major networks, and all you hear is that the House is holding everything up. When in fact the major roadblock is right there in the Senate with Harry Reid.
Well, it is, and I actually had an editorial about that yesterday in one of the papers. If you go to my website, you'll see it, www.barrasso.senate.gov. And what it says is there are a couple of hundred bills that have passed the House, but there are a couple dozen that have been significant bipartisan bills where at least 11 Democrats have joined the Republicans in support of these. These are job bills in terms of education, in terms of energy specific. There are also health care related bills, eliminating red tape, and I believe each one of these could pass the Senate today if Harry Reid would bring it up for a vote. So the House has done their job actually in a bipartisan way, and if it weren't for Harry Reid, we would get those things passed into the president's desk today, which would be more a Wyoming approach to jobs, the economy, debt, and spending. I got a hearing that starts in a minute, and so I hate to have to sign off because I'd enjoy just talking to you for the rest of the day, but it's on public lands and in the Energy Committee, and I need to get there now.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and thank you very much, Senator, for calling in, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk to you soon.
I look forward to it. Thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot. There you go. It's Senator Barrasso, and with that, we'll take a short break, and when we come back, we'll hear from Campbell County Chairman of the Campbell County Board of Commissioners, Mark Christensen. I'll play his testimony before the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee. This was from yesterday. You just heard Senator Barrasso talk about it. Hopefully I didn't make him late. I know it was only supposed to be about a 15-minute interview, and it went a little long, so hopefully we didn't make Senator Barrasso late. But we need to get caught up on spots, so we'll be right back. News Talk 1270 KIML.
Questions, comments, complaints? No, wait, skip the complaints. Email Don anytime. Don Carpenter at basinradio.com. It's Don Carpenter on News Talk 1270 KIML.
Hoping for a repeat from 6 years ago. I'm Keith Kelly. This is the Cow. I'm Keith Kelly. This is the Cow. I'm Keith Kelly. This is